Hey everybody, this is Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? I'm smiling because of what is going to be transpiring. It's sort of coming a little quicker than I thought. So today I'm going to read Oahspe. I'm going to read that. But before I do, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. I appreciate it. Helps spreads the word. Now, no matter where you are on the fence with free speech, I made a Twitter again. There's a reason for that. There was a mass exodus with people being censored for speaking their truth. And I think a lot of times people forget that you might have an opinion or a thought, and you have your opinion and your thought, and I think it's healthy to discuss it respectfully. Whether you are aware or not, the man who just bought that company is going to bring back that type of speech that can't be infringed upon. You're watching the world crumble down. And I hope for people who don't see it, why are things all of a sudden crashing with certain children's channels? Why are certain things starting to be put out in the media more frequently than you would expect? Well, it's because the old system of ways of doing things are dying and collapsing. As in everything that I've been reading, I've been trying to prepare people with the texts from way back in the day, trying to show you that we already did this. We're just having to do it again. And now it's in modern times. We all chose to be here for a purpose. We all have a different mission. We all serve a different purpose, but united together we stand. We all serve a purpose on this planet. And you know, I was a major lesson for a lot of people when it comes to that. A lot of people don't really comprehend, like, oh, you're such a good person and da 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 da, but you're going to kill everybody. And now they're trying to like retract it in their own ways, like, no, you were never a danger, but and yet you still go along with the beat. What's going to happen in my eyes, in my opinion, could be a few things. And I want everybody that is viewing me from around the world to really take notice. The United States is, Russia started it first. The United States is probably going to finish it with China in the middle and some other countries that you'll hear in the news. And the reason why I'm talking about it before I do the Oahspe reading is because I want you all to be aware and prepared. I've been saying on social media to please have stock of food and to make sure you are capable of being without lights and without things for a few days, maybe a week. Who knows? We don't know how that's going to transpire, if it does. But it doesn't hurt yourselves to be prepared. There might not be internet. there might be a shutdown. Make sure you have capabilities of reaching people. I don't know if the entire internet will go down. I don't know. It feels like a Y2K moment. If we are all aware of when that happened, everybody is freaking out. Nothing really did occur, but just be prepared. That's all I'm saying. There might be something put out on Twitter in the next couple of days, maybe next week, and we'll see if that's a verified, to make sure that we are understanding that things are coming, a storm is incoming, to be prepared. So some of you know what I'm talking about, and many of you might not. Just be aware that people like me with the tinfoil crown hat, the tinfoil crown, nope, I just do my research. And what you consider what misinformation is, isn't. It's perspective. We're all allowed to have it, unless you live in a dictatorous country, which then where I am, it is absolutely full-blown dictatorship, and a lot of freedoms have been lost. A lot of laws from the Constitution have been broken. The Nuremberg Code has been broken multiple ways. We are on the dawn of a new age, and we all have to come together, and we have to forgive each other for the horrible things that were said. And if you said something to somebody that tried to warn you, and be nice about it, right? They were just trying to have your best interests at heart, and you kind of ignore them, and you're crazy. Really think about those people that you were saying that to, and you don't, apology, not apology. They're going to be the ones that are going to help you comprehend the magnitude, the explosion and eruption of what is going to happen. And it's going to happen soon. So I just want to put that out there. Be prepared. Food, water, ways of charging things. Even though the internet's not out, I still pay for a landline that I can't afford, but I left it up all this time so that if I need to get into contact with family, I can. Not that I really have much of my family left, but the people that I care about, I have their numbers. Make sure you look into avenues of offshoot sites that you can text others. It's going down. It's going to be amazing. It's not going to feel amazing. It's going to suck. But I'm really praying that this is what is going to happen, that needs to happen, so that this world could be unified once again, and that we can all start putting ourselves in a better state. No one deserves to suffer. No one deserves to be left empty. No one deserves to be on the streets. And yes, people do choose to do those things, but there are ways and solutions to helping those people out. There are plenty of things that can happen. But what's going on is taking down food industries. I know why. I can't share it here. And we're going to read. I have to see what chapter I was on. Two vice gods had Suga, Birhat, Brahat, and Visvars. I'm sorry, again with the names Visvarsarij. Next to these, Sudica's heavenly chief marshal Atma, who had 4,000 marshals under him and equally divided amongst them to command 1,000 million heavenly warrior angels. Atma had authority over 30,000 generals, captains, to whom were allotted 2,000 million angels. And these falsely assumed the names of the ancient gods and lords of thousands of years before. Suga has said to them, that my age may be magnified before the newborn in heaven. Ye shall also magnify your own names by taking the names of gods and lords who are revered in heaven and earth. For all things are free unto you, but unto none others do I give privilege to choose the names of the ancients. Then Suga made two great captains, Varsa and Bhaktu, and he said unto them, 2,000 million angels have I allowed to go down to earth, to the land of Venu, to subdue mortals and have dominion over them permanently. And I have divided 2,000 million betwixt ye twain. But all other angels shall remain in my heavenly kingdom and work for me, and embellish it, and beautify my heavenly cities, especially my holy capital. Now, when ye twain are permanent on earth, and secure in the temples and oracles, ye shall survey all the lands of Venu, and the cities, large and small, and all the people therein. And behold, all men shall be subdued unto my two names, Sudica and Deus. And when a city standeth, wherein the people worship any other gods or lords, that city shall ye destroy, and all the people therein. City against city shall it be, man against man, for as I, the all highest God of heaven, so will I be the God of earth and is Lord. And ye twain, in finding two cities to be destroyed, shall divide, one going with his angel warriors to one city and the other to the other city. And ye shall inspire them against each other unto death. And when they are laid low, ye shall bring into the place to inhabit it my worshippers. Thus descended to the earth the two destroying captain gods, Verser and Baku, with their 2,000 million angel warriors. And they spread out about over the land of Venu, where were many kingdoms of thousands of cities. And they came to mortals asleep or awake, and inspired them to havoc and destruction for Suga's sake. And there were laid in ruins in 12 years 4,000 cities, of which 37 were great cities. And the chief of these were Yadam, Wachada, Kalak, I'm going to skip all that, since of which contained more than 1 million souls, and some of them 2 million. In all these, there were places of great learning and schools and temples of sacrifice, worship. In Siddhar, the roof of the temple was made of silver and copper and gold, and it had 1,000 columns of polished stone and 500 pillars to support the roof. The walls were covered with tapestry painted with written words and histories of heaven and earth, and of the gods and lords and saviors of the ancients. Within the temple were 7 altars of sacrifice and 4,000 basins of holy water for baptismal rites. Within the walls of the temple were niches for 500 priests for the confession of sins, for receiving the money and cloth and fruits of the earth, contributed by the penitent for the remission of their sins. Through the central passage where within the temple drove the king in his golden chariot, when he came for sacrifice, and the floor of his passage was laid with silver and gold. In the center of the temple floor was a basin filled with water, and the size of the basin was equal to 20 lengths of a man. In the middle of the basin was a fountain throwing up water. And on the east and west, north and south sides of the basin were 4 pillars of polished stone with stairs within them. And the tops of these pillars were connected to beams of inlaid wood of many colors, polished finely, which were called the Holy Ark of Sudga. On the summit of the ark was a small house called the Voice of the Oracle, for here sat the king's interpreter of heaven and earth. The reader of visions and the spirits of the dead appeared in the spray of the fountain, sometimes as stars of light and sometimes in their own forms and features, and were witnessed by the multitude. Within each of the 500 pillars was a sacred chamber for benefit of the priests communing with the angels. In the east pillar was an opening from top to bottom, a stateway to the multitude could see through the pillar, which was hollow its entire height. This was occupied by the king's high priest and priestesses, as the case might be, and this person had attained to adaptship, so that the angels could carry him up and down within the pillar, even to the top thereof, which was equal to 50 lengths of a man. And the multitude thus beheld him ascending and descending. In the west pillar was the library of the temple, which contained history of its important events for a period of 800 years, of the priests and high priestess and of the kings of the city. Next to the temple, which was called Trista, stood the house of learning, where congregated the wise men and women skilled in philosophy, music, and astronomy and mineralogy. The house was made of polished stone and wood, interlocked, and in front with 140 columns of polished stone and wood. Within the house were the skins and bones of thousands of creatures, ancient and modern, which were classified and named, and with these were books of philosophy and history, all of which were free to the public one day in 7. Next to the house of learning was the temple of death, dedicated to all kinds of battles betwixt lions and men, tigers and men, betwixt lions and tigers and elephants, and betwixt man and man. And so was the great temple of death, that its seats could accommodate 300,000 men, women, and children. The temple was circular and without a roof over the arena, but the greatest of the buildings in Siddhar was the king's palace, commonly called Temple of the Sun. This was also made of polished stone, and on the 4 sides had 800 columns of polished stone, and next to the columns were 50 pillars, on each side connected by arches 12 lengths high, whereon rested a roof of wood and stone, and yet on this was surmounted another row of 400 columns of polished wood, inlay with silver and gold, and these were connected on top by other arches 10 lengths high, and on these another roof, and on the top of this a dome, covered with gold and silver and copper. From the arena to the dome, the height was 28 lengths, and the base of the dome across was 16 lengths. To enter the temple from the west was a chariot roadway, so that the king and his visitors could drive up into the arena of the palace in their chariots. But as for the interior of the king's palace, a whole book might be written in the description thereof, and yet not to tell half its riches and beauty and magnificence. Besides these great buildings, there were 450 temples of darkness, dedicated to the spirits of the dead. These were without any opening, save the door, and when the communers were within and the door shut, they were without light. In the midst of these temples, spirits and mortals congregated, and the spirits taught mortals the art of magic, of making seeds grow into trees and flowers, of producing serpents by force of will, of carrying things through the air, casting sweet perfumes, and casting foul smells, of casting virus to one's enemy and inoculating him with poison unto death, of finding things lost, of bringing money to the poor, and flowers and food to the sick, of entering the dead sleep, and of becoming unconscious to pain by force of will. Nor could any man or woman attain to be a priest in the temple of Trista until he mastered all the degrees in the temples of darkness. The angels of Sukkah decided to destroy this city, and accordingly, they inspired a war betwixt in and the city of Yadam, which was second unto its magnificence, and possessed of temples and palaces like unto it also. Yeah, but to describe one of these great cities was to describe the other. As to mortal glory, for 700 years had these cities lain in peace with each other, half a day's journey apart on the great river Uvisigi, in the valley of Raja Wichita. The captain god Versa chose one city, and the captain god Barku chose the other city, and each of them took from their 1,000,000,000 angel warriors a sufficient number, and inspired the two great cities unto everlasting destruction, even as mortals turn savage beasts into an arena to witness them tear and flay each other. Even so sat these captain gods in their heavenly chariots, witnessing the two great cities in mortal combat. And when one had too much advantage, the angel hosts would turn the tide or let them rest a while, then urge them to go at it again, holding the game in such even balance as it would ensure the greatest possible havoc to both. 8 years these battles lasted, and hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children were slain. And when thus the great cities were reduced, the gods let loose the ban of death, whose angel office was to carry poison virus from the rotten dead and inoculate the breath of the living. And then in desperate madness, make mortals fire their cities to keep them from falling into other hands. And in the 8 years, the great cities with their mighty temples were turned to ruin and to dust. And of the people left, only the ignorant few, starving, helpless wanderers, could tell the tale of what had been. Sukkah had said, all knowledge amongst mortals is imbecile to the gods in heaven. Therefore, I will destroy all knowledge on the earth. And this was the same doctrine maintained by Tn, god of Japheth. In such manner proceeded the captain gods of Sukkah over all the land of Inu, laying low all kingdoms, all cities, and palaces and places of sacrifice, the places of learning. And in 100 years, the mighty people of Inu were reduced to beggary and to scattered tribes of wanderers. The great canals were destroyed, and the upper and lower country became places of famine and barrenness. And in the valleys and on the mountains, in the abandoned fields and in the wilderness lay the bones and skulls of millions of human dead. And lions and tigers came and prowled about in the ruined walls of the fallen temples and palaces. Nor were there left in all the land a single library or book, or art of making books, or anything to show what the great history had been. Thus perished the Vedic language, the language of song and poetry and great oratory, save in a small degree such as was preserved by the remnant of Faithists who had escaped through all these generations, still in secret worshiping the Great Spirit. Hear ye next of Osiris and his dominions, and Arabia and Parsiri and Helisti. Osiris the False, on setting up a heavenly kingdom of his own, and the dominion over Arabia and Parisi and Helisti, said, let Tn and Sukkah pursue their course in destroying. Mine shall be in the opposite way. Osiris the False said, 3 kinds of bad people I have found in heaven and earth. They that are forever finding fault with and putting down in what others have built up. They are most crafty in argument to find the flaws of others, the inconsistencies, errors, and shortness, but there is nothing in them to build, or anything in heaven or earth. The next bad man is he who findeth fault not only with all that hath ever been, but with all propositions designed for a new state of affairs. He is as worthless as the shaft of a spear without a head. The third bad man I found is he who, seeing the faults and errors of others, harpeth not upon them, but plunged into work with something new and bold, involving himself and others in disaster. And these three have the great multitude, the world, to take care of. I alone am capable of destroying and building up. The non-resistance of atheists have ever made them dependent on the mercy of their neighbors in heaven and earth. They must be destroyed, and their doctrines also. In destroying their doctrines, I must give something in place. I have labored to put away Jehovah, establish the Lord God. Now to put away the latter and establish myself as myself would take over hundreds of years. Better then it is that since Deus is cast into hell, I take the names Lord God, Deus, and Creator, and all such are capable in heaven and earth. Neither will I rob them of their rites and ceremonies, but so added thereunto that by the superior glory they will accept mine. Nor will I abridge mortals of their learning, but on the contrary, but most exacting the high in aspiration, for by this will I win the approval of the wise and learned. Male and female will I give unto them. Osiris then called Baal and Azeroth and Egypt into his heavenly council chamber, and said unto them, 2 idols shall ye inspire mortals to build up unto me, and one shall be the finger of the male horse, with a man's head and chest and arms, and he shall point upward, signifying heaven rest. And the other shall be the figure of a mare, with the head and breasts and arms of a woman. And she shall hold a bow and arrow before her, and behind her a sword and a rose, signifying for righteousness' sake. And the male idol shall be called Osiris, and the female Isis. For wherein I assert myself creator of all living, I must now show unto man that I am male and female, which of a truth is the fountain of all that is in heaven and earth, wherein projection and reception are the sum of all philosophy, in which ye shall teach that to go forth in Osiris and to rest in meekness is Isis, for which the ancients used the bull and the lamb, Taurus and Aries. For I was a globe, boundless as to size and swift as to motion, and I put forth a wing for flying and a hand for labor, by which are all things conquered and subdued. And beneath the wing I set the lamb of peace as a sign of the flight of the defenselessness, but under the hand I will set the head of a bull as a sign of my dominion. And I made heaven and earth, with wings flying forth, bearing the serpent and the sun. Square with the world and the circumscribed have I made all things good and powerful. And in man's hand I place the key to unlock the mysteries of the firmament of heaven, and the power and wisdom and riches of glory of the earth. Into his hand I place a club to slay the lion or to subdue him. For I am like unto man, having created him in my own image. And I hold the key of heaven and earth, and dominion over all the inhabitants I created on the earth. I am Tau, I am said. I am the light and the life and the death. Out of myself made I all that live and ever have lived. The sun, the firmament I set up as a symbol of my power. The stars and the moon and things that speak not and know not are the works of my hand. Without me nothing is, nor was, nor ever shall be. Whoso goeth forth warring for the right is for me, and I am with him. With warriors I am a god of war. With the peaceful I am the Lamb of peace. To do is of me. To not do is not of me, but of death. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, blood for blood, mercy for mercy. But force unto all things, with will to conquer, for in these I am manifest unto men. For in the beginning I created the world of my own force, And this is my testimony justifying force, even with violence, when the greater good cometh to the greater number. Hereon hangeth my law, in which any man can understand, that had the faithless fought for righteousness, they would have long since mastered the world and subdue it under their God. What then is the stratagem of gods, save by some means to reduce men and angels unto oneness in all things? When Osiris had thus addressed the three gods, he waited for them to speak. Baal said, "This is a foundation. We have never had a foundation for men nor angels." Azaroth said, "This is the head and front to lead the world." Egypt said, "The wisdom of the faithless was in having a direct course." Osiris said, "Then will I revise the doctrines of earth and heaven. I will not say this is for Deus, nor the Lord, nor God, nor Osiris, nor Apollo, nor any other God. But I will give that which all save Jehovahans can accept. For I will allot unto God all things, not defining which God or what God, but God only. The rest will I manage in Arhodidin, my heavenly kingdom. Go ye therefore to mortals and revise the things of Deus unto God. And if mortals question of the oracles to know who God is, say ye, he is Osiris to the Osirians, Apollo to the Apolloans, Isis to the Isians. He is the creator, the master, the all, out of whom were created all things. He who created man in his image, who dwelleth on the throne in heaven. But if they question further, asking if he is the ever-present, answer them nigh. And if they say, is he Jehovah, the great spirit, answer them nigh. For I will not suffer the faithless to dwell alive on the face of the earth. Boom. Hawk, Hayek, Wad, and Parisi dwelt King Luthag, a man of great wisdom and kingly power. His capital city, Sowurts, lay on the border of Francia and had 12 tributary cities, each city being ruled over by a king. And great drought came upon the regions ruled by Luthag, and being a king of benevolence, he sent inspectors far and near to find a country of water and good soil, but alas, they found not what they was desired. Hogleth consulted the oracles, and behold, the angel Egypt came and answered the king, saying, "Send thou thy seer, and I will lead him." So the king sent for his high seer and told him the words of the oracle. The seer said, "Wherever the God touched thee, suffer thou me to touch also, and perhaps I can hear thy God speak." The seer touched the king in the place, and at once the God spake to him, and he heard. So it came to pass that God led the seer to Egypt, which at the time was called South Arabia. The seer knew not the country, and he asked the God. The spirit said, "Behold, the land of Egypt." Thus named that land, which is the land this day called Egypt. The seer found the land fertile and well watered, and he returned to Parisi and informed the king. Thereupon the king commanded his people to migrate to Egypt, and they so went. In the first year 50,000, and in the second year 100,000, and for many years after an equal number. These things occurred in the 700th year of the reign of Deus and Hord. And in the space of 200 years more, behold, the land of Egypt was peopled over with millions of people, for the drought and famines in countries around about drove them hither. Luthag sent his son to govern the land of Egypt, and he made it tributary to the kingdom of Sowurts. The son's name was Haxax. And when he was old and died, he left the governorship of Egypt to his son, Bakal, who broke the allegiance with Parisi and established all of Egypt as an independent kingdom. Baraki's son Goth succeeded him, and Goth enriched his kingdom with great cities and temples and places of learning, and founded games and tournaments. Goth's daughter Rebek succeeded him and was the first queen of Egypt. Rebek still further and enriched the great land with cities and places of learning. Thus stood the country at the time Deus was overthrown in his heavenly kingdom. And now for 70 years, the gods Osiris, fallen Azeroth, and Egypt had not much power with mortals. And during this short period, the shepherd kings migrated into Egypt in vast numbers. And in sympathy with these and of kindred faith were the followers of Abraham, the faithists, who also migrated rapidly to Egypt. Meantime, the kingdom had passed from Rebek to her oldest son, Hawan, and to his oldest son, Naaman, and his older son, Sev, and to his daughter, Arma, and to her oldest son, Hatha, and to his oldest son, Rogsag. And here stood the matter where Osiris resolved to revise the records of mortals and angels as regardeth the history of creation by God, which he did according to his own decrees, which were as hereinbefore stated. So it came to pass that through the oracles King Rostag bestowed upon the libraries of Egypt the history of creation of heaven and earth, with the origin of sin and the creation of man, the first of whom was thence called Adam instead of Azu, adopting the Parisian word instead of the Vedic. And these records were the same from which Ezra, 3,000 years, Estrudian time, afterward made selections and erroneously attributed them to be the doctrines of faithists, who were called Israelites. And the records of the faithists were not kept nor permitted in the state records, but kept amongst the faithists themselves, for they were outlawed then, even as they are to this day, because they would not adopt the saviors and gods of the state. Rostag's son, Hiram, succeeded him, and Thaumas, his son, succeeded Hiram. Thaumas was a seer and prophet and could see the gods and talk with them understandingly. Thaumas was succeeded by his daughter, Hannah, and she was succeeded by Hojax, who was the builder of the temple of Osiris, commonly called the Great Pyramid. In honor of the prophet of Deus, the first mortal servant of Osiris, whose name was Thoth, Hojax named himself Thothma, which is said God Thoth of Osiris told Hojax, "Thou art the very Thoth reincarnated, and behold, thou shalt be God of the earth." Thothma could hear the gods and talk with them understandingly, and to him Osiris, through his angel servant god, Egypt, gave special care from his youth up. At the age of 16 years, Thothma passed the examination in the House of Philosophy and in astronomy and in mineralogy. At 17, he passed the Builder's School and Histories of the Thousand Gods. At 18, was admitted as an adept in the life and death, having power to obtain the dormant state, and to see without his mortal eyes, and to hear without his mortal ears. At 19, he ascended the throne, it being the time of death of his father and mother. For because Osiris desired to use Thothma, he sent his destroying angels, and they inoculated the breath of Hannah and her husband, and they died by poison in the lungs. Osiris, through his servant god Egypt, thus spake to Thothma, saying, my son, Thothma said, I hear thee, O God. What wouldest thou? Osiris said, provide thou a dark chamber, and I will come to thee. Thothma provided a dark chamber, and then Osiris, through his servant God, came to him, saying, thou hast great wisdom, but thou forgettest thy promise. Thothma said, in what, O God? Osiris said, when thou wert in heaven, thou saidst, now will I go down to the earth and reincarnate myself, and prove everlasting life in the flesh. For many years, Osiris had told this same thing to Thothma, until he believed faithfully he had so been in heaven, and returned and reincarnated himself for such purpose. And he answered Osiris, saying, like a dream, it so seemeth to me, even as thou say it. Osiris asked Thothma what was the greatest, best of all things. Thothma said, there are but two things, corporal and spiritual. Osiris said, true. What then is wisdom? Thothma said, to acquire great corporal knowledge is the first place, and in the second to acquire spiritual knowledge. But tell me, thou God of wisdom, how can a man obtain the highest spiritual knowledge? Osiris said, to come and dwell in the heaven and seek for oneself. Thothma said, how long shall a man sojourn in heaven in order to learn its wisdom? Osiris said, 1 day, 100 days, 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, according to the man. Thothma said, if one could leave the corporeal part for 100 days and travel in heaven for 100 days, would it profit him? Osiris said, to do this is to master death. Behold, thou hast already attained to power of the dormant state. To control the course of the spirit, that is the next lesson. Thothma said, behold, O God, I have attained to the power of the dormant state, even as the magicians who submit to be buried for 90 days. Yeah, I go hence in spirit and see many things, but my soul is like a breath of wind and goeth at random. Osiris said, provide thou me a temple, and I will come and teach thee. Thothma said, how to keep the body so long that it be not damaged? That it is a question. The magicians who have been buried long, being dug up and resurrected, find their body so damaged that they die soon after. Osiris said, thou shalt build a temple of astronomy and dedicate it unto Osiris, savior of the man and of angels, God of heaven and earth, and it shall be built square with the world, east and west and north and south, and the observing line shall be with the apex of the Hindian vortex, which lieth in the median line of the variation of the North Star. In the form of a pyramid shall thou build it, measured for measure, while I show thee every part. And thou shalt provide such thickness of walls that no sound, no heat, no cold can enter therein. And yet thou shalt provide chambers within suitable for thyself and for thy chiefs and thy friends, who are also adepts. For I have also provided the earth unto heaven, and heaven unto earth, and my angels shall come and dwell for a season on earth, and my earthborn shall go and dwell for a season in heaven. Yeah, they shall come to me on my throne, and behold the glories I have prepared for them. Nor shall my temple be exclusive, but open unto all who will pursue the philosophies of earth and heaven, for which reason thou shalt build it with the sun, moon, and stars, and it shall be a testimony unto the nations of the earth, and that thou art the highest of all mortals, and first founder of everlasting life in the flesh. For as the angels of heaven can return to the earth and taken upon themselves corporeal bodies for a season, so shalt thou master thine own flesh to keep it as thou wilt. For this is the end and glory for which I created man on earth. Does the emerald tablet start making sense now? I don't know, maybe. Osiris then instructed King Thothma to drive out the land of Egypt all the faithless, especially the shepherd kings, who cannot be made slaves of. Thothma impressed an army of 200,000 warriors and drove off the shepherd kings, putting to death more than 300,000 of them. And from the faithless he took all their possessions, such as house and lands, and suffered them not to hold any mortal thing in possession, neither permitting them to till the soil, serve as servants, nor to engage in any other labor save as servants. And they went out of the land of Egypt to escape the tyranny of Thothma, 3 million faithless, including the shepherd kings, the unlearned. And in regard to the faithless who remained in the land of Egypt, Osiris, through King Thothma, made the following laws, to wit: thou shalt not possess any land, nor house, nor ox, nor any beast of burden, nor cow, nor calf, nor shall they people possess an altar or of worship, nor temple, no place of sacred dance, but a servant and a servant of servants shall they be all the days of their life. But in thy sleeping place and in the sleeping place of thy family, thou shalt do worship in thy own way, nor shall any man molest thee therein. Thou shalt not profess openly thy doctrines under penalty of thy blood and thy flesh, nor shall they teach more in the schools or colleges, nor shall thy children receive great learning, and of thy arts of measuring and working numbers. Thou shalt not keep them secret longer, or thy blood be upon thee. And if thou sayest, behold the great spirit of Jehovah, that ever present, thou shalt suffer death, and thy wife and children with thee. And if a man query to try thee, asking who created the world, thou shalt answer, behold God. And if he shall further ask, thinkest that the Creator is ever present, thou shalt say nay. But as a man that hath finished his labor, he sitteth on his throne in heaven. And if he further ask thee, where is God? Thou shalt answer, on the Mount Hord in heaven. And if he shall further ask thee, in the ever-present person, thou shalt say, nigh. The ever-present is void like the wind. There is but one ruler in heaven and earth, even Osiris, who is Lord and the God, Savior of men. Who else but doth these things shall be put to death? Whoso boweth not unto Thothma, my earthly ruler, shall not live, saith God. These laws were entered into the libraries of Egypt and also proclaimed publicly by the scribes and seers. And yet with these restrictions upon them, they were remained in the land of Egypt more than 2 million faithists. And it came to pass that Thothma began the building of the temple of Osiris, pyramid, and he is impressed 200,000 men and women in the building thereof, of which number more than one half were faithists. And these laborers were divided into groups of 12 and 24 and 48s, and so on, and each group had a captain. But for series of groups of 1,728 men and women were generals, and every 6 generals there was one marshal, and for every 12 marshals was one chief, and these chiefs were of the privy council of the king. And the king allotted to every chief a separate work, some to dig canals, some to quarry stone, and some to hew the stones, some to build boats, and some to provide rollers, and others timbers, and yet others captains. To 2 places the surveyors found stone, with which to build the temple. One was above the banks of the great river Egon, at the foot of Mount Hesca, and the other was across the plains of Nirf, in the mountains of Aqaba. From the headwaters of Egon, a canal was made to Aqaba, and thence by locks descended to the plains of Nif, and thence to Gakri, the place chosen by the king of the temple to be built. As for the logs used in buildings, they were brought down the rivers of Egon, even from the forests of Gambotha and Rozga. These logs were tied together and floated on the water to the place required, where by means of capstans they were drawn out of the water ready for use. As for the stones of the temple, they were hewn in the region of the quarries, and when properly dressed, were placed on sides of capstans, and then by capstans let down the mountain sides to the water, whereupon they were to float to the place required for them. The floats were made of boards and sawed by men skilled in the work, and were of a sufficient length and width to carry the burden designed. And at the bottom of the floats were rollers, grudgoned at the ends. Good. That's not going to come out right, guys. Now, when a stone was let down from the place of its hewn onto the float, it was ready to be carried to its destination. And when the float was thus arrived near Gakri, ropes made of hemp and flax were fastened to the float. And by means of capstans on the land, the float was drawn up an inclined plane out of the water, the rollers of the float answering as wheels. When all things were in readiness for building the temple, the king himself, being learned in all philosophies, proceeded to lay the foundation. and to give instruction as to the manner of building it. These were the instruments used by the king and his workmen: the gow, the square, the compass, and the plume and line. Nor were there any other instruments of measure or observation used in the entire building of the temple. And as to the measure call of length, it was the average length of a man after trying 1,000 men. This was divided into 12 parts, and these parts again into 12 parts, and so on. After the first part of the temple was laid, the builders of the inclined plane began to build it also, but it was built out of logs. And when it was raised a little, another layer of the temple was built. Then again, the inclined plane was built higher, and another layer of the temple built. And so on, the inclined plane, which was of wood, was built up, even the same as the temple. The width of the inclined plane was the same as the width of the temple, but the whole length of the inclined plane was 440 months of man. Up this inclined plane, the floats with the stones thereon were drawn by means of capstans, and by men and women pulling also. For 24 years, with Thothma building the temple, and then it was completed, but it required other half a year to take away the inclined plane used in building it. And after that, it stood free and clear, the greatest building that had ever been built on the earth ever would be. Such then was Thothma's temple of Osiris, the great pyramid. Jehovah had said, "Suffer them to build this, for the time of the building is midway betwixt the ends of the earth. Yeah, now is the extreme of the earth's corporal growth. So let it stand as the monument of the greatest corporal aspiration of man. For from this time forth, man shall seek not to build himself everlasting on earth, but in heaven. And these things shall be testimony that in the corporal age of the earth, man was of like aspiration, and in spiritual age of man, in an opposite condition of corporal understandings. For by the earth I prove that was, and by man prove what earth was in its certain periods of time." Last chapter, chapter 50. When the temple was completed and the king and his 4 high priestesses entered into the holy chamber, the false Osiris, through his servant god Egypt, came in Osiris and spake unto the king, saying, Here am I, O king. Thothma said, My labor is well recompensed, that thou hast come to me, O Lord my God. I am blessed. Osiris said, Keep holy my chambers, suffer no man, nor woman, nor child, that dwelleth on the face of the earth, to know the mysteries of these, my holies, save and accept my adepts. Here lieth the key of everlasting life. Thothma said, How sayest thou the key of everlasting life? Osiris said, Herein is that which is of good and evil. As I commanded thy forefathers to eat thereof, man shall become as gods and live forever. For this is the triumph of man over death, even for which I created him on the earth. Thothma said, Shall only we 5 know these things? Osiris said, Nay, verily, else the light of my kingdom would not be full. Behold thou how I built the temple. Was it not in the keeping of adepts? So then, as I have given unto thee to know my kingdom, thou shalt give unto others, not suffering these lights to come, save through my commandments. Now in the 2nd month after the temple was completed, Thothma the king, having put the affairs of his kingdom in order, went into the holy chamber, and thence ascended into the chambers of life and death, leaving the 4 chief priests in the holy chamber. And Thothma cast himself in death, dormancy, by swallowing his tongue. Whereupon the priests closed the entrance and sealed the king within. Osiris, through his servant god Egypt, said unto the priests, One alone shall remain, in quarter watch shall ye dwell within the holy chamber, and I will remain also. And the priests cast lots, and divided the watch in 6 hours each, unto every day. And Osiris sent Baal to the spirit of Thothma, and took him to Adina, Osiris's heavenly place, showing him unto the spirit the glory of the throne, saying, Behold, the gods of gods. Thothma said, It is a great glory. Lo, my eyes are blinded by the light of the Lord my God. After this, Baal took the soul of Thothma into 1,000 heavenly places in Osiris's kingdom, and showed him the glory thereof. Thothma said unto Baal, Thou angel of God, thou hast shown me of a truth. God is in the image of man, nor is there any but one God, who ruleth over all. Baal said, How sayest thou then, who is God? Thothma said, How sayest thou? For behold, his glory was so great I could not look upon him. Then answered Baal, saying, Only angels and mortals, these are the sum of all things. He thou hast looked upon was even as thou art, of one time mortal on a far off star world. He obtained unto the Godhead to create a world unto himself, even as thou, who art an adept, canst create flowers and plants and serpents. Thus he came into the void regions of space and created the earth and her heavens, and they belong unto him, for they are his. And in like manner is every star world created and ruled by a God like unto thy God, who is Lord of all. Thothma said, Oh, that all people knew these things. Oh, that I may remember them when I am returned to earth. Baal said, More than this shalt thou remember, for I will take thee to the hells of the idolaters and the Jehovahans. Baal then took the soul of Thothma to the hells of Deus, and showed him the horrors thereof. But he took him not to the regions of God in Kreshevi. Now when Thothma had traveled in heaven for 30 days, Baal brought his spirit back to the chamber of death, and showed him how to regain his corporeal part, that which he did. And then Baal signaled into Egypt, and later spake to the priests on watch, saying, Behold, Thothma had returned. Go thou and fetch thy brother, and deliver him into the holy chamber. And when they came, they unloosened the sealing stones, and delivered the king into the holy chamber. And he was awake from his trance, and remembered all he had seen in heaven, which he related to the high priests who were there with him. And both Baal and Egypt came in Sigris, and talked in the holy chamber with Thothma and the priests. For one day the king remained in the holy chamber, that his spirit be reconciled to the flesh. And on the next day he and the priest came forth out of the temple, and sealed the door thereof, and placed the king's guard in charge, that no man or woman might molest the place. Now Thothma had been in the death trance for 40 days. The three angels, Egypt, Baal, and Azaroth, came into the altar in the king's palace that night, and showed themselves to the college students who had obtained a depth. Baal spake orally before them, and directing his words to the king, saying, Behold, I am the angel of God, thy Lord, whom thou hast beholden in heaven. I am the one who traveled in heaven with thee. What I speak, I say in the name of the Lord our God, whose servant I am. On the morrow shall they, high priestess, draw lots, and one of them shall enter the chamber of the holies in the Osiris temple, and do even as thou hast. And after him, behold, another of the high priests shall do likewise, and so on until the four have thy experience. And it came to pass that the four priests in turn cast themselves in death, and visited Osiris' heavenly kingdoms, and also many of the hells of Deus, being led in spirit by Baal and Azaroth, Egypt being the guardian god of the temple. When they had thus accumulated the same knowledge of heaven and earth, the five of them were at one mind as to obtaining everlasting life in the corporeal body. Osiris said, Behold, I will bring many back who are already dead, and they shall call unto their embalmed bodies, and wake them up and inhabit them. Go ye then to the root of the matter, and prepare my people, for I will come in person, and inhabit the temple ye have built, and my heavenly kingdom shall descend even to the earth. Prepare ye the column of the stars. Thothma built a column to the east line of the slight, 7 lengths, and the height was 36 lengths. Of the wood and stone built he, with an opening from the bottom to the top, and the width of the opening was 6 lengths. In the walls thereof was a winding stairway, and there were windows looking out to the east and west and north and south, that the stars from every quarter might be observed. On the summit of the column were dwelling places for the seers and the mathematicians, with places for measuring and instruments and lenses. When this was completed, Thothma built of wood and stone an external wood wall across the slat of the temple. And within the wall were stairs also, and these led to the top of the pyramid. This wall was also provided with windows, and the northern stars might be observed. Thothma made an observing column for the sun, and it was provided with lenses of all colors. So the adept standing at the base of the pyramid could see the sun at every hour of the day and distinguish the spots and their changes. At Gao was set within each of the angles of observation, that the relative position of the sun was northern stars could be determined every day. By these 2 columns, therefore, Thothma and his mathematicians measured the sun and moon and stars as to the distances and sizes thereof. And Osiris commanded the king to send into the far-off lands of the earth his wisest mathematicians to observe the winds of heaven, and to drought upon the earth and the abundance of the yield of the earth in different regions, in different years and seasons, and to observe famines and pestilences and all manner of occurrences on the face of the earth. He said unto the king, when thy mathematicians are returned to these with their accumulated wisdom, thou or thy successor shall examine the sun and the stars and moon, as compared to the things whereof the mathematicians shall relate 1 year with another, and 3 years with another, and 3 years and 5 with 5, and 7 with 7, and so on for hundreds of years and thousands of years. And when thou hast taken in the term of 3,300 years, and compared the sun and moon and stars as related to the occurrences of the earth, thou shalt have the key of prophecy for 3,300 years ahead. And thou shalt say of this land and of that land, and of the people and that people, how it will be with them, and thou shalt not err. Thothma the king called together his mathematicians, and according to their grade, chose from amongst them 1,200. These he divided into groups of 100 each, and he gave them a sufficient number of attendants, and he sent them toward all sides of the world, allotting to them 16 years each for observation according to the commandments. And they took with them all kinds of instruments to measure with, besides scribes, to make the records of such matters as came before them. And they were throughout Arabia and Vinu and Japheth, and Parisi and Haliste and Europa, even across to this western sea and to the south extreme of Arabia, Africa, and to the great kingdoms in the interior, to the north of Haliste and Parisi and Japheth, to the regions of everlasting snow. And in 16 and 17 years they returned, save some who died on their journeys, and some wonderful was the knowledge those mathematicians gained. In some countries they found philosophers who had the knowledge required even at their tongue's end. Thothma received them in great pomp and glory, and awarded all of them with great riches. And Thothma had these things rewritten and condensed into books, and named them books of great learning. And they were deposited within the south chamber of the pyramid, where never harm could come to them. And Thothma made it a law that other mathematicians should travel over the same regions for other 16 years and make like observations, and after them, yet other mathematicians to succeed them, and so on for 3,300 years. And accordingly, a new expedition started forth. Now, during the absence of the first mathematicians, Thothma and his philosophers observed the sun and moon and stars every day, and a record was made thereof as to places and movements, and as to the earth in the regions of Thothma's home kingdom. And these observations were reduced to tablets and maps, and a record made of them in Parisian language, which was the language of the learned. For the Egyptian language of the day was spoken mostly by the unlearned and was mixed with the Phoenician, a language of sounds. After the mathematicians returned, Thothma and his philosophers examined the whole matter as compared with the maps and tablets of the heavens, and the facts deduced therefrom were written in a separate book and called the Philosophies of God and his son Thothma, king of the earth. Copies of this book were made and sent into the lands of Arabia, Vinu, Jaith, and Parisi, and Helisti, and Europa to the priests of gods, but the original book was filed in the holy chambers in the temple of Osiris. Thothma applied himself to impart wisdom unto all men, and during his reign, he built in the land of Egypt 77 colleges of great learning, 12 colleges of prophecy, 200 houses of philosophy, 7 adeperies, and 3,000 free schools, and 4,000 houses of sacrifice unto Osiris, savior of all men, 340 obliques to God, 30 triumphal arches to Deus, 4,000 onsnus to the Creator, and they were mounted on pedestals of polished stone and stood at the street corners. And there were graduated to the rank of adept during Thothma's reign more than 4,000 men and 300 women, all capable of the death trance and of going about in spirit. And all of these over 700 were permitted within 30 years to test the cast of the holy chambers in the pyramid. And their spirits were conducted into Osiris, heavenly regions, and sojourned there for many days, and returned to their bodies unharmed. Because of the position of the chambers, there was no action upon the bodies whilst in swoon. Thus did Thothma prove himself to be one of the wisest and greatest men that ever dwelt on the face of the earth. He believed all things the gods told him, believed he was Thoth reincarnated, and believed he would never die as to the flesh. The false Osiris, through his servant god Egypt, had said to Thothma, "This is the manner of heaven and earth as regardeth man. All men are reincarnated over and over until perfected to immortal flesh. And in that day, man hath so perfected his adeptism, he can remain on the earth or ascend to heaven, even when he desireth. Hence all knowledge, adeptism is the greatest." Thothma asked if there were any new creations. Satan prompted Osiris, who said, "Nay, thy spirit is old as the earth. At first it was small and round like a grain of mustard, only it was spirit. And the multitude of these seed compromise the all unseen. When one of them taketh root in the gestation, then is the beginning, and it is born into the world a frog, or an ass, or a worm, or a lion, or small and creeping thing. And it liveth its time and dieth, and the spirit hath it back again into another womb, and it is born forth a man low as to knowledge, evil as to life, and he liveth a time and dieth again. But again the spirit hath back to another womb, and it is born forth again another man, but wiser is as to knowledge, and less evil as life. And this continueth to hundreds of generations and to thousands. But he who hath attained adaptship hath it in his power to call forth out of the earth his own corporeality. He needed no longer to go through the filth of others. Thothma was wise even in his belief, for when he was growing old and beholding his flesh sunken, and his eyes growing hollow and dim, and his hands getting withered, he inquired of the gods, saying, "I know thou hast taught me truth, O God. I am weak before thee as to judgment, and curious in my vanity." Osiris said, "Speak thou, O king." Thothmes said, by all the force of my will and by my great learning, I cannot stay the withering of this flesh. If therefore I already dry up like a mummy above the power of my will, how will it be with me when I am further emaciated? Satan prompted Osiris to answer the king, and so he said, unto thou art even more emaciated, thou canst not understand the power of thy own soul. With this, the king was reconciled, and even at the time he was tottered on his last legs. He began to build a new place, saying, after I have changed this flesh into immortal flesh, hither will I come and dwell forever, and I shall be surrounded by adepts wise and faultless, and this shall be the first colony of the kind I will build on the earth. But afterward I would build many colonies of like kind, more and more of them, until I have the earth redeemed to immortal flesh, for of such shall be my kingdom, and all men and all women on the earth shall own me, Lord of all. Nevertheless, with all Thothmes' wisdom and the wisdom of the gods, he fell on the stone and died suddenly on the day he was 100 years old. I know that was long. What did that just say? It just showed us how we keep reincarnating and reincarnating. But then who was it that answered? Satan! Tying everything I've ever said back into the loop of where are we? What is this place? It just told you how it happens. And it is truth. At least for me, I know that I've been reborn and reborn and reborn and incarnated and incarnated and incarnated. And that's how in other literature works of channeling, of people doing hypnotic regression. You start off in the first density, you go to the second, then you go, and then you keep accumulating knowledge, and you learn your lessons, you learn your soul growth, you're learning, you keep learning, you continue to learn, you die, you're the victim, you're the warrior, you're the poor, you're the rich. Each life you live a different experience in a different womb. And then the cycle continues and continues. So again, where and who and what God are we worshiping or reading about and what have you? Because it now starts to make sense as I'm finishing off that last chapter there. It's telling you how we've been all living. And yes, the false. But this is where we're in the loop that got stuck. Does that now make a little bit more sense? We've been stuck. We've been recycling. We've been growing spiritually. We've been growing with knowledge. We've been growing and having some good lives, some bad lives, some good lives, some bad lives. All for soul acknowledgement and soul growth. But under whom? Not no more, evil one. Not no more, because soon the glory takes back his kingdom. Because that kingdom will be in 4D. The positive polarity will reign again, and it will no longer be a negative timeline. If you're curious, go to the debt clock and start looking under credit card debt. And you're going to see something miraculous start happening. I posted it in my Telegram. I'm also on Twitter. So go find me. I usually don't post much besides meteorological stuff because I'm a weather weenie. And me, it's we, not me. It's all of us. My favorite Jason saying, it's we, not me. We're a collective. All of us are. All of us are. And it takes all of us to defeat the things that have been put in our path for millions of aeons. And now it's our time to forgive, to understand it was all a part of divine's plan, and to start moving forward and accepting everybody. There's no one religion that has it right. Zero. So get that out of your head. I had someone not attack, but like make a really odd, crude statement. And I felt the intention coming off that statement. And I'm like, whoa. And it wasn't from this book. It was from my synopsis of the Keys of Enoch. As we see, I have a lot of paper and books behind me. I have to go back and I'm continuing to do that. So I'll be working on that. I'm going to start with the love one. And then there's a couple of podcasts I got to listen to because of the exciting news that happened today. And time is ticking. Time is ticking. And I could really use a miracle right now. I can really use something of a higher source to come and help. So sending each and every one of you love and light. Have a wonderful day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are. Remember, we're in it to win it for all of us, not just some of us, it's all of us. Even the ones that are still asleep or just not resonating with things. And that's okay, that's their path. But we got to do it for them as well because they're a part of the ride just like we are. This is humanity and this is all of us. Now we have to unlearn the things that we've been force-fed to listen to and be indoctrinated with since we were born. And it's not to say all of it is wrong, because not all of it is wrong, but a lot of it is. And it's up to us now to decode what is the truth and what isn't the truth, and to make sense out of it and start accepting it and understanding that we've all been duped. We were told a bunch of lies. Now we got to make it right, and we have to help one another out. So let's come together, okay? I'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.